Dr. Arjun Mehta and Priya Sharma looked like the perfect newlywed couple in Sydney, but beneath their picture-perfect smiles lay a secret so shocking it would end in blood, betrayal, and one of Australia's most chilling true crime cases. Dr. Arjun Mehta had always lived by rules. Growing up in Mumbai, he had been the kind of student every parent wished for: disciplined, brilliant, and ambitious. By 33, he was already a respected cardiologist, known for his calm composure and dedication. When he received an offer to join a private hospital in Sydney, it felt like the perfect next step in his life. His parents were proud, but beneath their happiness, there lingered a constant reminder that their son was still unmarried. Each phone call home eventually circled back to the same topic. Arjun had brushed it off for years, claiming he was too busy to think about marriage. But now that his career had stabilized, he could no longer avoid it. It was his mother who first brought up Priya Sharma's name. She came from a respectable family in Delhi, they said, educated, soft-spoken, and modest. Priya worked as a nutritionist in a wellness clinic and was known for her simplicity. Arjun's parents were convinced she would make the perfect match. Reluctantly, he agreed to meet her through a video call. When her face appeared on the screen, something about her quiet confidence drew him in. She wasn't loud or attention-seeking. She spoke gently, with eyes that seemed to hold both sadness and mystery. Over the next few weeks, their conversations became frequent. They talked about food, family, and the new life they might build together in Australia. Arjun, who had spent years focused solely on his medical career, found himself smiling at his phone between shifts. He admired how she valued emotional connection over material things. When he asked about her past, she said she had few friends and didn't like talking much about personal struggles. Arjun respected that. He believed everyone had a right to their privacy. By early 2021, families on both sides had agreed to a virtual wedding due to pandemic restrictions. The ceremony was simple: 2 screens, a priest, and a handful of family members connecting from different cities. There was no extravagant celebration, but to Arjun it felt peaceful. He believed destiny had worked quietly to bring him the one thing missing from his perfect life. When travel reopened months later, Priya arrived in Sydney with 2 suitcases and a shy smile. Arjun met her at the airport, holding a small bouquet of white lilies. Neighbors later recalled seeing them together that day, she in a soft pink kurta, he helping her with luggage, both looking like the picture of new love. The first few weeks were everything Arjun had imagined. They cooked together, explored small cafes near their apartment, and took long walks by the harbor. But there were small moments Arjun couldn't quite explain. Priya avoided long conversations with strangers and flinched whenever someone took a photo. She insisted on locking the bathroom door, even when she showered or changed, and she would never undress in front of him. At first, he assumed it was modesty. Coming from a conservative background, he respected her boundaries, yet something about her nervousness began to unsettle him. She received phone calls late at night in another room, speaking softly, always hanging up quickly if he entered. Her explanation was always the same: calls from friends back in India. Once Arjun found her crying quietly on the balcony. When he asked what was wrong, she said she missed her family. But when he offered to arrange a video call with them, she refused immediately, claiming they didn't like technology. Arjun noticed other strange details. Her passport looked newly issued, with no visible travel history before 2019. She avoided talking about her childhood or showing any old pictures. Even when he suggested they plan a visit to India to meet her parents, she seemed panicked, insisting it wasn't the right time. Still, Arjun brushed aside the unease. He told himself it was just the stress of starting over in a new country. To the outside world, they were an ideal couple. Neighbors often saw them grocery shopping together or sitting on a park bench sharing tea. Arjun was proud to have a wife who carried herself with grace and intelligence. Priya seemed grateful, even affectionate, in her own reserved way. But deep down, Arjun sensed something fragile about their happiness, as if it was built on a secret she wasn't ready to share. He ignored the signs, believing love would eventually melt away whatever walls she had built. He had no idea that the silence he mistook for shyness was actually fear, and that the woman he had just promised his life to was hiding a truth that would soon destroy both of them. The first few months of marriage passed quietly, but Arjun couldn't ignore the growing feeling that something about his new life was slightly off balance. Priya was polite, kind, and attentive, yet there was always a distance between them, something she kept tightly guarded. At first, he convinced himself it was just adjustment. She was in a new country, far from home, still settling into an unfamiliar rhythm, but as weeks turned into months, that explanation began to crumble. It started with small inconsistencies. Priya often said she worked remotely for an Indian wellness company, but Arjun never saw her on video calls or receiving work-related emails. She claimed time zone differences made her schedule odd, yet Arjun couldn't recall ever seeing her talking about her colleagues or work deadlines. She spent most of her time alone in the apartment, browsing on her phone or taking long walks during the day. When he asked her about her future plans in Australia, she gave vague answers, changing the subject before he could press further. Intimacy between them was almost non-existent. Whenever he tried to be close, she would find an excuse. She was tired, not feeling well, or fasting for a religious reason. In the beginning, Arjun respected her boundaries, telling himself not to rush her. But after months of marriage, the rejection began to sting. It wasn't the lack of physical connection that bothered him most. It was the way she seemed frightened whenever he reached out, as if she expected something terrible to happen. Then there were the papers. One afternoon, Arjun was looking through the cabinet to organize their immigration documents and noticed that Priya's medical records seemed incomplete. The vaccination history stopped abruptly a few years ago. Her birth certificate looked like a reissued copy rather than an original, and her passport bore signs of being newly printed, with a photo that seemed professionally retouched. When he mentioned it casually, Priya froze for a second, then smiled and said her old records were lost when her family moved houses in Delhi. The answer sounded rehearsed, but Arjun let it go. The real turning point came one morning when he was doing the laundry. Inside one of Priya's dresses, he found a small Ziploc packet tucked in the pocket. It contained a few white pills without a label. At first, he thought they were vitamins, but when he looked them up later that night, his stomach tightened. They were hormonal tablets, typically prescribed to patients undergoing hormone replacement therapy. When he asked her about it, Priya's reaction shocked him. She started trembling, tears forming instantly. She said they were for a medical condition that affected her hormones and begged him not to ask any more questions. The way she pleaded, terrified, desperate, made him stop pushing, but the unease took root. From that day onward, Arjun began to notice every strange behavior more sharply. She often stared at herself in the mirror, touching her face as if checking for something invisible. She never went swimming or wore sleeveless clothes. She avoided public places with security checks, and once, when a nurse friend of Arjun's came over for dinner, Priya became so uncomfortable she excused herself mid-meal and locked herself in the bedroom. Arjun's suspicion turned into quiet obsession. He started watching her more closely, noticing details he had previously ignored. The faint, linear scar near her collarbone, the unusually deep tone in her voice when she was angry, the way she avoided showers when he was home. He couldn't shake the feeling that Priya was hiding something enormous. He began searching for clues. While she slept, he went through her phone, but most apps were deleted and the call history was empty. He installed small security cameras around the apartment, pretending it was for safety. When Priya wasn't around, he opened her drawers and laptop, but found nothing conclusive, just fragments of a life that didn't add up. One night, after everyone had gone to bed, Arjun sat in his study, staring at the immigration papers he had secretly photocopied. He noticed something strange. The identity number on her passport didn't match the one printed on her medical form. It was subtle, but different enough to raise alarm. When he cross-checked it online, he was directed to a name he had never seen before, *Pranav Sharma*. The name sent a chill through him. He didn't know who that was, but the last name, Sharma, was the same as Priya's. For the next few days, he couldn't sleep. His mind raced through endless possibilities. Was Priya living under a fake identity? Was she involved in some criminal activity? Was someone blackmailing her? The questions gnawed at him until paranoia began replacing reason. He became irritable and withdrawn at work. His colleagues noticed the change but assumed it was stress. Only Arjun knew the truth. Something inside his marriage was deeply wrong, and he was determined to uncover what it was, no matter what it revealed. The night Arjun finally uncovered the truth began like any other. He waited until Priya fell asleep, her breathing soft and steady beside him. The glow of her phone, plugged in on the bedside table, caught his eye. He hesitated for a long time before finally picking it up. He had already tried unlocking it before without success, but that night he noticed something different. The fingerprint unlock option had been disabled. He entered her usual four-digit PIN, the one she often used for small household deliveries, and to his shock, the screen opened. Inside there were barely any photos, no messages, no social media app. It's almost as if she had scrubbed her digital presence clean. But hidden deep in the file manager was a folder labeled Travel. He clicked on it, expecting pictures of tourist spots. Instead, he found scanned documents, medical forms, travel receipts, and one blurry passport image of a person who looked like Priya but wasn't. The photo showed the same eyes, the same facial structure, but the name below it read *Pranav Sharma*. Arjun's heart began to race. He scrolled through the files, finding a certificate from a clinic in Thailand and another document referencing gender reassignment procedures. For a long time he sat frozen, unable to process what he was seeing. The papers detailed surgery dates, hormone therapy schedules, and post-operative care instructions, all belonging to the person in that photograph. It was undeniable. The woman he had married, the person he had brought home as his wife, had once been someone else entirely. He felt dizzy, betrayed, and sick all at once. His mind flooded with disbelief. Every secret, every strange reaction, every hidden pill suddenly made sense. Priya wasn't just hiding a small part of her past. She was hiding her entire identity. He went through her closet next, hands trembling, searching for more proof. Beneath a pile of scarves, he found a small locked suitcase. He pried it open with a screwdriver and found old photographs, official documents, and a few handwritten letters. The images showed a young man smiling with friends, then gradually fewer and fewer as the years passed. The last few pictures were from a hospital room, showing that same person bandaged and pale, with the name tag Pranav S. at the foot of the bed. There was also a letter addressed to someone named Maya, written in shaky handwriting, saying "I'm finally becoming who I truly am. I hope the world lets me live this time." Arjun sat on the floor of the bedroom surrounded by papers, his thoughts spiraling. He remembered how she had cried that first week, how she avoided being photographed, how she panicked whenever someone mentioned her family. It wasn't deception for pleasure or gain, it was fear. Fear of rejection, fear of discovery, fear of being seen as a lie instead of a person. But instead of compassion, something darker began to grow inside him. He felt humiliated. He thought of his parents back in India, proudly telling relatives that their son had married a beautiful woman. He imagined the whispers, the gossip, the laughter if they ever learned the truth. In that moment, his love twisted into anger. He couldn't bear the thought of being the fool in his own story. For days afterward, Arjun pretended nothing was wrong. He smiled at Priya, made breakfast, even kissed her goodbye before work. But behind his calm expression, he was unraveling. At the hospital, he searched medical databases, learning everything he could about gender transition procedures. The more he read, the more enraged he became, not because of the science, but because he felt excluded from it, as if his life had been rewritten without his consent. Meanwhile, Priya noticed his growing silence. She tried to reach out, asking if he was stressed or unwell, but he brushed her off. At night, she lay awake, sensing the distance but not knowing why. She thought perhaps he was bored of her, that he regretted marrying someone so quiet, so cautious. She had no idea the storm that was forming beside her. Arjun began avoiding her during the day, claiming long hospital shifts. He spent hours rereading the letters, staring at the photos, trying to convince himself there was some mistake. But there wasn't. Every document confirmed what he didn't want to believe. Priya Sharma had once been Pranav Sharma. His wife had once been a man. The revelation consumed him. It wasn't just betrayal to him. It was personal humiliation, a crack in his perfect image. And while Priya hoped silence would protect her from the pain of rejection, her secret had already become a weapon in the wrong hands. The home that had once felt safe and full of new beginnings now felt like a cage of unspoken truths, where love was dying quietly and anger was learning how to breathe. The night everything came to an end was cold and eerily quiet. It was May 2022, and their apartment in Parramatta sat under a soft drizzle that blurred the city lights outside their window. To anyone passing by, it looked like the home of a peaceful newlywed couple, two professionals building their life together. Inside, however, the air was heavy with silence that had lasted for weeks. Arjun and Priya barely spoke anymore. When they did, it was polite, short, and emotionless. Beneath that calm exterior, a storm was brewing, one neither of them could escape. Arjun had stopped pretending that everything was normal. Every time he looked at Priya, the documents and photographs he had found replayed in his mind like a haunting film. He saw not his wife, but a stranger who had rewritten his life without permission. His love for her had transformed into something darker, an obsession mixed with fury and disbelief. The anger didn't explode all at once. It simmered quietly, building with every glance, every lie, every reminder of how easily he had been fooled. Priya sensed the change but didn't know why. She walked through the apartment as if stepping on glass, unsure what would trigger his coldness. He still left for work every morning, but the warmth in his voice was gone. She tried to bridge the distance, cooking his favorite meals, leaving notes by his bedside, but none of it reached him. He had already crossed into a place of quiet hatred. To him, every kind gesture now looked like manipulation, every word like a lie. On the evening it happened, Arjun returned home earlier than usual. Priya was in the kitchen, humming softly while preparing dinner. He stood in the doorway watching her. She turned, startled to see him home so soon, and smiled nervously. Something about that smile, gentle, trusting, and unaware, broke something inside him. Without a word, he walked to his study, opened the drawer, and pulled out the papers he had found weeks ago. When he came back, Priya was setting the table. He dropped the documents in front of her. She froze, staring at them, her face draining of color. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. The truth was there in front of them, naked and undeniable. The silence stretched painfully. Arjun's voice trembled when he finally spoke. He accused her of lying, of humiliating him, of ruining his life. Priya tried to explain, but the words barely formed. Her body shook as she told him she had wanted to tell him, that she feared he wouldn't understand, that she hadn't meant to hurt him. But to Arjun, her explanations sounded like excuses. His anger, pent up for months, finally erupted. What followed was chaos. Neighbors later reported hearing loud noises, something heavy falling, furniture scraping the floor, but no screams. Priya tried to run, but Arjun's rage blinded him. He grabbed her, shouting words he wouldn't remember later, his hands shaking uncontrollably. In that storm of fury, control disappeared. He didn't stop until everything went silent. When he finally stepped back, Priya was motionless on the floor, her eyes still open in shock. For a long time he stood there staring at what he had done, his breathing uneven, his mind blank. Then the panic set in. He ran cold water over his hands, scrubbing until the skin turned red. He dragged her body to the guest room, trembling, unable to think clearly. His brain shifted from guilt to survival in a matter of seconds. He couldn't let anyone find out, not like this. That night, Arjun dismembered her body with surgical precision, using the same hands that once saved lives in the hospital. He worked mechanically, emotionless, like performing a medical procedure. When it was done, he placed the remains in a suitcase and sealed it shut. He spent the rest of the night cleaning the apartment, scrubbing floors, changing carpets, and burning what he could. At dawn, he drove to the Parramatta River. The streets were empty, and the early morning mist covered everything like a shroud. He parked near a bridge, carried the suitcase down to the edge of the water, and pushed it in. The splash was small, barely noticeable in the quiet dawn. He stood there, watching the ripples fade, breathing heavily, the enormity of what he had done still not sinking in. Then he returned home, showered, and went to work as if nothing had happened. When coworkers saw him that morning, they noticed nothing unusual. He looked tired, maybe a bit distracted, but calm. No one could have guessed that just hours before, he had taken a life. He told them Priya had gone to visit a friend in Melbourne, smiling faintly as he said it. To him it was a perfect lie, simple, believable, and untraceable. But lies, no matter how carefully built, always leave cracks, and soon the truth would start seeping through them, piece by piece. In the days after the murder, Arjun lived in a strange calm that felt almost unreal. He went about his daily routine as though nothing had changed, waking early, going to the hospital, and coming home to an empty apartment. He told his colleagues that Priya had taken a short trip to Melbourne to visit a friend and would be gone for a week or two. He even messaged her phone a few times, crafting fake conversations so it would seem like she was still alive. At first, it worked. No one suspected anything, but silence has a way of growing suspicious when it lasts too long. It was Priya's friend, a woman named Ananya, who first raised concern. After several days of unanswered calls and messages, she reached out to the local police to file a missing person report. Officers visited Arjun's apartment, asking routine questions. He welcomed them in with the same steady confidence that had always made patients trust him. He said Priya had been stressed and needed space, that she'd packed a suitcase and left after an argument. His voice was calm, his words precise. The officers took notes, nodded, and left, but something about his composure unsettled them. A few days later, detectives returned. This time they asked to search the apartment. Arjun hesitated but eventually agreed, confident he had cleaned everything. The rooms looked spotless, yet when forensic experts examined the guest room, they found traces of blood under the newly installed floorboard, tiny droplets invisible to the naked eye but glowing under luminol. When confronted, Arjun claimed Priya had cut her hand weeks earlier. The explanation sounded rehearsed, and the officers made note of it. Meanwhile, the investigation widened. Detectives reviewed CCTV footage around the area from the week Priya vanished. What they found began to unravel Arjun's carefully constructed story. One clip showed him late at night carrying a large suitcase down to his car. Another showed him buying duct tape, bleach, gloves, and garbage bags from a nearby hardware store. Each piece of evidence added weight to the growing suspicion that Priya hadn't gone anywhere willingly. 2 weeks after her disappearance, a fisherman spotted something unusual floating near the edge of the Parramatta River, a black suitcase caught among reeds. Police divers were called in, and what they found confirmed everyone's worst fears. Inside the case were human remains wrapped carefully in plastic. The forensic team worked quickly to identify the body, and within days, dental records confirmed it was Pranav Sharma. The discovery sent shockwaves through the community. The story spread across Australian and Indian news outlets. An Indian doctor accused of killing his wife. Arjun was brought in for questioning again, and this time the evidence left him nowhere to hide. He denied it at first, claiming he had been framed, that someone must have planted the suitcase to destroy his reputation. But when confronted with the receipts, the CCTV footage, and the blood evidence, his silence broke. The confession came quietly, without drama. Arjun admitted that he had killed Priya after learning she had been born male. He said he had felt deceived and humiliated, that in a moment of uncontrollable rage, he lost his mind. He described how the argument escalated, how anger clouded his judgment, how everything afterward felt like a blur. When detectives asked why he didn't simply leave her, his answer was chillingly simple. He couldn't bear being made a fool of. During the trial, Arjun's defense argued temporary insanity, claiming the discovery had caused a psychological breakdown. But prosecutors presented a different picture of a man who had methodically covered his tracks, cleaned his home, and disposed of the body with surgical precision. They described a doctor who had allowed pride and shame to turn him into a murderer. The jury agreed. Arjun Mehta was found guilty of premeditated murder and sentenced to life imprisonment without parole. The verdict brought a strange sense of closure to those who had known Priya, but it also sparked a larger conversation. Activists and media outlets began discussing the dangers faced by transgender individuals who live in fear of rejection and violence. Priya's story became a symbol of how deeply rooted prejudice can destroy lives, not just through hate from strangers, but through love twisted by shame and ignorance. In the courtroom, as the sentence was read aloud, Arjun sat motionless. There was no visible remorse, only emptiness. The man who had once dedicated his life to saving others had taken one in the most brutal way imaginable. Priya's ashes were later sent to India, where a small group of friends held a quiet ceremony in her memory. Her story lingered long after the headlines faded, a haunting reminder that truth, no matter how painful, should never be hidden out of fear, and that secrecy born from shame can sometimes cost the highest price of all. In the end, both Arjun and Priya were victims, one of societal judgment, the other of his own unforgiving pride.